Hi, everybody, and welcome. It's Friday, so it must be Kinetics USA weekly show, Onwards and Upwards, everything that a nurse needs to know or any healthcare worker needs to know about coming to live and work in the United States. I am your host, Tanya Friedman, CEO of Kinetics USA, part of AMN Healthcare, and we are the #1 company for direct hire healthcare workers, international healthcare workers coming to the United States. Our topic today is our monthly segment, our legal Q&A with our expert Q&A expert panel. Oh my goodness, it's Friday and I'm battling to speak. And I'm going to be joined in a moment by our expert panelist. I see Chris Marcello is joining us. Hi, Mike. Welcome.
Hey, Tanya. Hey, Chris.
It's like is it the Chris and Mike show or the Mike and Chris show? I don't know.
I think it's the Tanya show.
No. Chris and Mike and Chris is a spin-off. So for those of you who are joining us today, I think we seem to have some noise interference. For those of you who are joining us today, today's segment is going to be legal questions for our expert panel. I think if we can take just a minute, Chris and Mike, if you want to introduce yourselves. I know you are no strangers to the show, so probably everybody knows who you are. But for those of you who are joining us for the first time, Chris, maybe let's start with you to do a quick introduction.
Yeah, so I'm Chris Marcello. I'm an immigration attorney in Ohio here, and I've been working on healthcare and nurse visas for almost as long as Mike.
Thank you, Chris. I think between the two of you, probably thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of healthcare workers, right?
I think that's probably right, Mike?
That's very fair.
Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, so my name is Mike Hammond. I'm also based here in Cincinnati and have been doing healthcare cases since 20 plus years, so about a week or two longer than Chris.
Okay. Well, welcome. So everybody who's watching, this is the real deal. These are the experts. Between them, thousands and thousands of healthcare workers have come through to the United States. So if you have a question for Mike or for Chris, please put that into the chat. My desk is full of questions here from viewers who have sent in questions over the week. So we're going to get started right away. And if you are watching today, please put into the chat your name and where you're watching from. We love to see all the viewers from all over the world. Okay, so Sheila is saying hi from the Philippines. Kala is asking the first question. I'm currently awaiting NBC to review my documents, DS-260 and civil documents. Oh, Kala is just giving us a status update. It doesn't seem to be a question. Sharmila is asking, how much time does it take after passing NCLEX and PTE for immigration? Chris, what are we seeing right now for the timing of an EB3 consular green card?
From the time the I-140 is approved?
Correct.
Yeah, so I mean, we're seeing, unfortunately, quite inconsistent times. We've seen some delays out of the Texas Service Center in the last, 6 or 9 months or so. And then the other wild card is the embassies. Certain embassies move slower or faster than the other. I think anything under 6 or 7 months is not unusual, though. And it's unfortunately, even something as much as 9 months we're seeing. I think once you get, towards the end of that 7, 8, 9 months, then you do want to make an inquiry to see if the government seems to have misplaced your case.
Okay, so less than a year, do you think would be a fair?
Definitely less than a year would be too long, in my experience.
Okay, thank you, Chris. So if you are thinking of coming to the United States in less than a year, you could be here living your American dream. Toyin has a question. What are the requirements to move to the US by a healthcare worker, especially as a nurse? So Toyin, I would suggest, I know it can be very confusing and overwhelming, this whole process, because you're dealing with immigration and licensing and credentialing and finding an employer. What I would suggest you do is look at the Kinetics USA website. We have a success path on there, which I know many, many nurses refer to. It gives you a guideline of exactly what the steps are in order to move through the process. The first is you have to pass the NCLEX exam if you are a nurse. And that is a process. We have many shows that we've done on that topic. Then you would prepare for your interview. So you would be interviewing with a healthcare worker, a healthcare organization here in the United States. The visa framework would come next, and that's the topic that we have on hand today. Either you're going to come on a green card, which might be a consular green card, or a adjustment of status green card if you're in the country. You might come on a TN visa if you're a Canadian or Mexican citizen. Then there's licensing and credentialing, get ready game plan, arrival sequence, and that's number 7, enjoy and prosper, which is what we want for everybody in the to come to the United States. Mike, we have a question about the visa bulletin. For those people who don't know about the visa bulletin, can you maybe give a brief explanation of what that is, and then maybe talk about this month's visa bulletin?
Okay, so the visa bulletin is a publication from the Department of State. And the Department of State basically says how many immigrant visas can be used in a particular given month. They kind of track them. It's like a mechanism, a counting mechanism to ensure that the limits of how many immigrant visas or green cards are passed out each year stay within the statutory limits. So we're allowed 140,000 per year. Fiscal year, it starts on October 1st, runs through September 30th. For the last several years, we've had more than 140,000 because there's something called a spillover from the family-based side. If family does not use all their allotted green cards or immigrant visas, they carry over to the employment side. And due to COVID, we had a large number of spillovers for the last 2 years. This current year, the spillover was about 48,000. So still a significant number. But the Department of State looks at people get, as Tanya mentioned, people get green cards in 2 different ways, either through the consulates, through the embassies overseas, or they get them through the U.S. in the USCIS in what's called a 485 or adjustment of status. The Department of State kind of tracks that and says, basically, in simplistic terms, kind of communicates with the USCIS and says, how many did you approve last month? How many's in your queue? And how many are you going to be able to get to? And does the same with the consulates. And so they set the priority date or your spot in the queue in the visa bulletin each month. And right now we have the February bulletin here in a couple of weeks, or maybe even within the next 10 days, we'll get the March's bulletin because it comes out each year or each month in advance. And you have to look for 2 things. You have to look for what country you were born in, and that's an important distinction. It's not your country of citizenship that counts. It's your country of birth. So you may have been born in India, moved to Canada, became a Canadian citizen. You might be eligible for a TN, but you're not going to be eligible to get counted under the Canadian category. Tanya, if you can put that slide back up for a second again.
Sure, no problem.
Okay, great. So you look at what country you're from and notice there's 3 countries that have their own kind of quota, their own category. Philippines, India, and China right now. Others can be added as numbers are used. And then everybody else falls into the other category. ROW simply stands for rest of the world, okay? And if you see the word current in your column, that means there's no line for you. There's no queue. You can immediately go through the process as Chris talked about. I-140 approved, NVC processing, going straight for an interview. If, however, you are in a category that's backed up, or what we call retrogressed, for example, India, they're currently working only on people who were filed and have a priority date established with a filing of an I-140 prior to June 15th, 2012, which means as a practical matter, if you're from India or you're from China, there's not really a viable EB3 option because the line is too long, where you're fine for Philippines, fine for the rest of the world. Now, we expect to run out of immigrant visas by the end of the fiscal year. That's not a bad thing. That just means they're using them all up. And then we get a new allotment. What we're all concerned about is when the demand exceeds supply, it creates retrogression. And that at some point, likely in the next 12 months, we're going to get some retrogression, potentially for everyone. In other categories, such as the EB2 category, which would be more like PTs, OTs, certain types of engineers, there's already a cutoff date for the rest of the world as well as other visa countries. So the visa bulletin is extremely important as it relates to the timing of you getting your green card. But right now, everything is clear sailing, and most people expect it to stay that way for the foreseeable future, at least until next year.
Okay, thank you, Mike. That was a really great, clear explanation of the visa bulletin. I know for many viewers, it can be very, very confusing. So thank you for giving us that explanation. And I think that for anybody who's watching now who is just deciding on embarking on this journey of coming to the United States, now is the time. There is no retrogression at this moment. As Chris said, you could be here in less than a year if you have already passed your NCLEX exam. And of course, you would need your English exam if you were not trained in English. But there really is a great opportunity right now. And I can tell you from my side specifically, we've been in international recruitment for many, many years. The demand in the US is explosive, is the word that I would probably use. And Chris and Mike, you would probably nod your heads in agreement. We really have never seen such demand for international healthcare workers ever. Well, since I've certainly been involved in this industry. So this is a great time. Okay, Dimakatsu is from South Africa, my home country. Welcome, Dimakatsu. Kay Live is saying hi. Roland is, Joy is from Nigeria. Bucky is asking, please, I'd like to know what could cause delay of feeble after waiting for over 90 days, Chris? So it seems like
nothing. Yeah, it's not a delay. I mean, it's not a delay. There's nothing that you're doing wrong or your lawyer is doing wrong or your employer is doing wrong. You know, as Mike talked a little bit about in his I think, a really good detailed description of the process. One of the things he said is this past fiscal year and the current fiscal year, we've actually had an inflated number of employment-based visas related to where really historical numbers have been. And so the historical number and next year's fiscal number will be 140,000 employment-based visas. In the last fiscal year and the current fiscal year, that's been inflated over 200,000 visas. As a result of that inflation, we're seeing delays at a lot of the service centers getting the fee bills out and getting the packet 3s out and getting the appointment scheduled. So it's not a delay, because a delay implies that someone's not acting, meaning you or me or the attorneys or Tanya or the employers. It's not anything like that. It's just the U.S. bureaucracy is taking a lot longer than it should take.
So thank you for that, Chris. So I have got a question that was sent in from Carla. So Carla is saying, I have my I-140 approved, but no fee bill until now. It's been 6 months. What could the reason be?
Yeah, so 6 months, you want to get your lawyer involved on that. That would be on the long end of the amount of time it should take. So there's no one reason. So this idea that we just need to identify the reason and then flip the switch and then the fee bill will be issued, that's unfortunately probably not what's happening. It's probably just an overworked bureaucracy that doesn't do their job as efficiently as we all wish they did. So it's not one reason. Having said that, we do want to get the lawyers involved and or the employers involved so that they can go through the channels to get that fee bill issued. And there's a variety of techniques we use, both contacting the National Visa Center and in some instances contacting congressional staff.
Okay. And for everybody watching, I know Chris, Mike, and Kinetics team as well have had success. If a case has been stuck and is over the expected time period, we definitely have seen success with some of the measures that Chris has just spoken about in getting a case through the process. Okay. We have a question here from Zaib, who's saying, can I apply for an H1 visa from Pakistan? And I'm thinking that Zaib is a nurse, Mike. Zaib doesn't say. What are your thoughts on that question?
So generally speaking, RNs do not qualify for the H1B visa. The H1B visa is limited to those professions where the minimum standard for entry into the profession is a bachelor's degree. And in the U.S., in all 50 of the U.S. states, The standard for getting a license is an associate's, or in some states, diploma type programs. So it's not a bachelor's degree. So there are certain exceptions to that. Nurse instructors, maybe someone who's got an MSN is going to teach, would qualify for an H-1B. Nurse educators, some nurse informatics type positions, but the general, whether it be med surg or some specialty, ICU, CCU, et cetera, would not qualify for an H-1B. If you're talking about a different occupation, med tech, OT, PT, et cetera, then you would qualify for an H-1B, and you want to reach out to Tanya's team about allied openings.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mike. Chris, we have a question here from Katie. Katie's asking, I'd like to ask what options are really available for cases when an applicant prefers to be interviewed in the country where they are currently working and for their dependents to be interviewed separately in their home country. My case at the moment was rejected by NBC to have this option while I'm in the DQ stage, however.
Yeah, I don't know what it means that the case was rejected for that. That seems unusual to me. So the first thing is, what really happens is a two-step process. First, you, the nurse, so let's pretend you are a nurse who's a Philippine native and your family's in the Philippines, but let's pretend that you're working in London, England. So we would go through your process to get your case approved in London, England. Then when you're approved, we would use something called the follow to join process to get your family. Keep in mind, these two events are going to happen a long gap between the two of them. If you want to all travel together, it's best to have all your appointments at the same time.
Okay. So thank you for that, Chris, and hopefully, Katie, you'll be able to sort that out with your family. Elissa has a question. I'm a medtech. I'll be deploying from the Philippines under an H-1 visa. My husband will be deploying from Qatar under the H-4 visa. Can he present only the copy of my H-1 approved visa during the interview at the U.S. Embassy in Qatar, or does he need to present the original copy, Mike?
Yeah, a copy should be fine.
Okay. So good news on that. And Mike, do you want to maybe just talk a little bit about medtechs and how they would come on the H-1?
Sure. So medtechs qualify for H-1s. There are certain states that do require licensure. So if you are in one of those states, you either need a license or eligible. A lot of those states, the licensure is an ASCP, maybe an AMT. There's an international ASCP that will qualify most, that will cover. If you're going to work for a for-profit hospital facility, you need to go through the H-1B lottery, which is getting ready to come up here in about 3 weeks. The filings start in March, or the registrations, let's call it. And then there's a lottery held at the end of March. And if you get chosen, then there's a 90-day window to file your case. If you're a med tech and you're going to what we refer to as a cap exempt facility, those are nonprofits affiliated with universities, so like a university hospital, then those can be filed year round and are not subject to the lottery. So, if you are being recruited right now, they are probably working to determine whether you're going to be in the lottery, and if so, getting some information to have that ready. MedTechs also require visa screens, but they've not required them at the filing stage. They just need to be filed or available when you go for your embassy appointment.
Thank you, Mike. So great opportunity for medtechs at the moment to come on an H-1 cap exemption visa or in the lottery. And we did a whole show at the end of last year on medtech. So if you're a medtech and are interested in the process and want to find out more about the licensing and the immigration process in more detail, then please watch that show. You can see it on our website, the Kinetics USA website, as well as our YouTube channel, our social media, and so on. Okay, Nilufar, I hope I've got that right, is saying, I'm a nurse. I just passed NCLEX and I hold an academic IELTS, overall 7.5 and 7 in speaking. All of my family members live in Atlanta, Georgia. My mom opened a case for me when she came to the USA. At that time, I was single and over 21. Then I got married. We didn't still change my status to married. I have my priority date in USCIS. Can this situation hurt my case for an EB3 visa? Chris?
Yeah, there's a lot of facts there. This is definitely something you want to get professional specific advice on, but just in a broad sense, it sounds like, and again, I'm not entirely sure because there was a lot of facts there. It sounds like she might have had a family-based case through her mom, and now she wants to get an employment-based case as a nurse. And just in the most general sense of things, they're independent. And so the fact you had that family-based case with your mom has no bearing, positive or negative, on your nursing case. It's an independent case.
Okay. So Nilufar, I would, as Chris said, please speak to your lawyer, but it sounds at a high level that there wouldn't be an issue. Gina's asking, any idea wait time to get interview date from the London embassy, Mike? I know all the embassies have varying timelines, but any input on London?
Yeah, I haven't had anyone go through London for an RN in a little while that would know, but we're not seeing any delays out of London for other visa categories. So I'm not aware of any unique delays in London.
Chris, are you any feedback on London at all?
Yeah, like Mike, I haven't had someone go through London in a while. I can tell you historically, it's actually been one of the slower embassies that I've seen in my experience.
Yeah.
But that's very general. That doesn't necessarily mean what's going on because recently, like Mike, I can't recall anyone going through London in the recent past.
Yeah, and Gina, I would also concur with that. It definitely has just at a high level been a slower embassy. But hopefully your case will be coming through soon. We are seeing a lot of progress in terms of the government catching up timelines that came through after the pandemic. So, the good news is that there definitely is progress. So hopefully you'll be in the United States soon. Armin is asking, is 2 years required for immigration purpose? I think 2 years experience probably, or also for the educational assessment, Mike?
Yeah, there's no legal requirement of experience to get an EB3 case approved. There are certain facilities that hire individuals who demand experience. And so there might be an experience requirement to go join XYZ facility, but it's not a legal requirement.
Yeah. And Armin, just to also add to what Mike has said, we see from our clients that there are some clients that will take nurses, healthcare workers who have zero experience, and some that are very specific about the number of years of experience that they are looking for. So it really varies from employer to employer from an employment perspective. Cynthia from Nigeria, Paul from Philippines. Abe has a question. Hi, priority date is 2006. If opt for premium processing, how long will it take to get consular interview in Abu Dhabi? A buy from it.
Yeah, maybe a year. No point. I mean, let's start now.
Yeah. Yeah. And the good news is if you've got your priority date from 2006, you kind of jump ahead of the line, right, Chris?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you may need to get your, if you had a visa screen back then, you'll certainly need new English fluency testing passed. You'll need a new exam. You may need, I'm not sure how the U.S. government would look at an NCLEX that passed, maybe as long as 20 years ago. I suspect they actually wouldn't have a problem if you can prove you passed the NCLEX. So you should be ready to go. You will need to go through some of those steps, though. But as Tanya says, the good news is retrogression, which impacts all Indian nationals right now, all Chinese nationals, and perhaps in the next fiscal year will begin to impact Filipino and other nationals. It seems impossible for it ever to affect your case. So good luck.
Yeah, so there you go. Hope to see you in America soon. Here's Kala's question. So Kala's question is, I have 3 children, one of which was in the US and is a citizen. I did not add him to my EB3 application. Would that be a problem, Mike?
Well, it's the U.S. citizen child's obviously not going to immigrate with you because they're already a U.S. citizen. However, they should have been disclosed on the I-140 form because it asks for all your children. So that would be something that we would you could clarify at the interview stage. There's no such thing as an amended I-140 for something like that. So I don't think it'll be a big problem. It just does need to be disclosed.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Okay, so one of the questions sent in is Ufayuma is asking, I applied for a visitor's visa sometime in 2021 and got a date May 8th, 2022 precisely, but traveled to the UK for my NCLEX and passed in April. And because I know I was going to start my process, I never showed up at the embassy for my May 8th visitor visa interview. Will this action affect my process in any way? Chris?
So May 8th is interesting because that's my birthday. So I think I'm perfect to handle this question.
We wanted to give it to you, Chris.
I'm sorry, that's my giving to me.
I had to give you that question.
Well, then if there's an April 16th one, I know where that one should go then.
Yep.
But in any event, yeah, so it probably won't. Having said that, as Mike said with his question about the U.S. citizen child, I think it's something you want to disclose, but ultimately, it's probably not going to be a problem for you.
All right. So, Ofayuma, this is the reason why we do the show, because we know that immigration can be scary. And sometimes you are lying in bed, worrying and thinking about a question. And here we have the experts who can give you reassurance or give you advice of what you need to do next or don't have to do next. All right, Chris, where were we? Chris has a question. My husband's work he's a seafarer, requires him to be out of the country a minimum of 6 months due to his work contract. Will going back to work cause any problem for my immigrant status green card later if he comes back to see me in the US? Mike?
Okay, so there's a couple of things to think about there. First of all, when you get a green card, the idea is that you're going to live permanently in the US. And having a job that requires you to be out of the US for up to 6 months at a time does not automatically create a problem. There are indicative things that they look at beyond physical presence, such as, are you still paying taxes in the US, which obviously you're paying taxes on that income you earn while you're overseas. Do you have a residence? So you've obviously got a family still here. All those kind of factors are going to indicate that you are still a intending US permanent resident in spite of spending 6 months overseas. If you, however, are going to be spending more than a year overseas, you need to obtain something called a reentry permit. And that's generally used when someone is, say, you're a college student and you're going to go overseas and spend a year in school and you want to return to your green card status, or maybe you're working with a company that transfers you overseas for a period of time. But that's only needed if you're going to be out for more than a year. So with the 6 month mark you gave, that's not a problem. Now, secondly, it will, however, affect the time it takes to become a citizen if that's the intention. Because to become a citizen, you have to meet a certain physical presence test, a certain number of days in the US. And if you're out 6 months a year, it may be very difficult. It will certainly take you a lot longer to meet that. That would not necessarily affect you. It will only affect your spouse. So I think that's very doable. It just, you want to get some professional advice from both a tax attorney or a tax accountant, as well as an immigration attorney, to make sure if that reentry permit's needed or something like that. But I think it's all doable.
Okay, good, Mike. So, Chris, hopefully you're breathing a sigh of relief. It's doable, which is good news. But please make sure to get advice to work out the logistics of how it's going to work for you and your family. Noreen has a question. Is it really necessary to work in bedside throughout the immigration process? What will happen if I resign from my work? And I actually have a question on my desk, which is very similar, from Zara, who's asking if she can resign from her hospital setting and work in a nurse-related BPO company. So I know that this is obviously a common question. The immigration process is long, and I will actually take that question just from an employment perspective. It is highly recommended that you stay in your job. And the reason for that is twofold. One is that nursing in the United States is very, very different to nursing outside of the United States. And if you're not keeping your skills up, it's going to be a much harder transition for you. So there's a lot of work and time and effort that goes into coming to the United States from the nurse's perspective. And you don't want to put yourself under undue stress when you get here and you are stressed out and overwhelmed because you are finding it such a difficult transition. And also from the employer's perspective, they're investing a lot of time and money and effort in you. They really want you to get up to speed and have a smooth transition. And if you have gaps in your employment, it's going to make the process much harder for them as well. So I would definitely encourage anybody who is thinking of leaving your job while you are in that wait period to, strongly encourage you not to do that, is I think the message. Obviously, sometimes there's circumstances, but strongly encourage you not to do that. Okay, so Joy is asking about medtechs and caregivers. So yes, Joy, we do offer both. And as I said, if you are a medtech, please watch the show that we did at the end of last year. It was a whole show on medtechs, very informative for any medtechs that are looking to come to the United States. And you can see that on the Kinetics USA website, as well as on our YouTube channel and our social media. And we also have caregivers, nurse aid programs. Chris, can you talk a little bit about the process for a nurse aid or caregiver?
Yeah, so caregivers are nurse aides. So it's a little different than a regular registered nurse process. So with a nurse aide, it takes longer is the short answer. We have to perform in the United States something called the labor market test, which we do not have to do for registered nurses. And the idea there is the U.S. government wants to make sure that there's no U.S. workers who want the jobs as caregivers. My experience has been over the last several years, there aren't any U.S. workers. So the good news is we will make it through that labor certificate or PERM process. The bad news is you're probably looking at adding a year or so onto the beginning of the process before we can do your I-140. Once we get to the I-140 stage, it's identical to a registered nurse, which is we do the I-140 stage. We get that approved, and then we do the NVC or consulate process stage.
Okay, so it's possible, just a bit of a longer, believe it or not, because it's long enough for nurses, but longer process for nurse aides. Okay, so we have a question here from Joseph. Mike, Joseph is asking, my visa screen is not ready yet, but I got an interview date already in the US Embassy London. Do you recommend me to proceed with the interview or wait for the visa screen? What would you recommend in a situation like that?
Yeah, I think different companies are going to advise differently because of how long it's going to take and what consulate you're at, as to whether the consulate's going to allow you to simply return with the visa screen once you obtain it, or whether or not they're going to force you to go through the rescheduling of another interview. And then the other factor is, why don't you have the visa screen? Is it because there has been a test, that the English test maybe has not been passed yet? In a situation like that, you'd certainly want to cancel and reschedule after you've passed. But aside from, if it's just a processing delay, you just don't have the certificate in hand yet, you're going to want to talk to your case manager, your employer, your sponsor, who's going to talk to the attorneys about what's the process at that consulate, and then decide what's the best situation. I don't think it's a same answer for all.
Okay, so we'd have to look at the specifics of that situation. And that reminds me also just to remind all nurses that, or any healthcare workers that are watching today, if you are required to take your English exam and you have not yet done that, please do so as soon as possible. It's really essential for you to pass the English if you were not trained in English. And we have at Kinetics what we call the Kinetics Care Package, which is where we pay for the review course for nurses that are sponsored by the employers that we work with. So the tools are there. We have study groups, we have mentors, we have the Kinetics College every Monday with classes and free courses. There's a lot of tools and resources. Make sure that you've got that, because you don't want to be in a situation like Joseph, and I'm not sure if he's passed or hasn't passed the English, but you get to the consulate and then everybody's scrambling because you haven't passed the English exam. Okay, Nathan has a question about expedites, Chris. I'm waiting for an interview date at the consulate in Mexico. I had one Expedite request denied. I'm waiting for an answer of a new Expedite sent. How often can I send in an Expedite? And what are the timings for interviews in Mexico? I'm not sure if you know the answer to that part.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that specific question. I'm a little skeptical about the expedite process. I think when everything gets expedited, then nothing's expedited. So I wouldn't put too much faith into that. The process, in number one. Number two, do you have a compelling reason why your case should be expedited, or is it just I really want to come to America? Having said that, yeah, go ahead and try expediting it, but don't over focus on it, because I doubt it's going to materially change the processing time.
Okay, thank you, Chris. And the second part of that question is, how, if you're going to apply for an expedite, how often can you do that?
I'm unaware of any rule that says that has a that 2 is fine and 3 is not fine. I don't think there's anything out there like that. Okay,
so no specific guidelines on that. Dimakatsu is asking, what is the difference between a standard visa screening and a 212R visa screening? Will I get a permanent residency green card with a 212R? Mike, what is a 212R?
So a 212R, it's a shame we don't have like Maria or someone else on this call much smarter than Chris or I who might know the specifics, but 212R is an alternative to the visa screen certificate that is, if I recall correctly, one of the criteria is you have to be licensed in one of only, I think, 5 states. And then you have had to have had your education from one of maybe 10 different countries. So it is a alternative procedure that CGFNS has created for individuals who meet those specific criteria. So I'm guessing that the criteria are on CGFNS website as to which state you have to already have your license in. So it's not something that most people, or very many at all, would meet the criteria for. I don't know if Chris, you've got something else to add on that, Mike.
Only because I'm on their webpage.
Oh, good job.
So yeah, Mike's got exactly right. I think
you can multitask.
Yeah, well, I had the advantage of not having to answer the question. Mike, of course, has it exactly right. The important thing for you as the nurse is, if you meet the criteria, go for the 212R. If you don't, you don't need to. But there's ultimately no real difference. You're still just getting a visa screen. The 5 states, by the way, and I did not know this until I Googled it 30 seconds ago. It's Florida, Georgia, Illinois, Michigan, and New York.
Correct. So, Dimakatsu, we also have quite a lot of content on the Kinetics USA website about that, about the specific visa screen and which countries and which states are applicable. And one of our team will actually post some of that information into the chat. If you are joining us now and interested in coming to the United States, please apply to the Kinetics USA website, and our team are on hand to speak to you. We have literally thousands of positions all over the United States and are really excited to speak to you and tell you about that and see which is going to be the best fit for you. Okay, we have a question from Jojo. Jojo is asking, since we did not see any Congress legislation during a pandemic period, can we expect anything in the future? As an Indian nurse, I'm confused and frustrated. Chris.
Yeah, I can certainly appreciate your frustration. Can we get legislation? Sure, I guess. Can we? Should we expect it? Probably not. Are we going to, as an industry, push something? Definitely. I'm going to DC in a couple of weeks here. We're laying out our strategy for this Congress. The biggest challenge is going to be, though, is we've got the Democrats control the Senate and the Republicans control the House, and they can't seem to agree on what day of the week it is, much less what immigration policy should be for America. So I'm skeptical that something will get passed, but that doesn't mean that we won't be trying as an industry.
So, Jojo, we echo your frustration with the lack of movement, and just know that there are a lot of efforts going on here in the United States. I think the one thing that's different now is, as opposed to years ago, and Mike and Chris, feel free to jump in on this, is that the demand in the United States is massive for healthcare workers right now. So that gives us hope, right?
Sure.
Chris nodding his head.
Hope is a good thing.
Yes.
Hope is a good thing.
Hope is eternal.
Sorry, Mike?
Hope is eternal.
Oh, there you go. Pearls of wisdom this Friday, Mike.
Mine's from Shawshank Redemption, the movie. Hope is a good thing.
I think mine's like a Bible verse or something.
Yeah, it's right, Bible, right?
Okay, moving on. Kat is asking, I think this question, there's a lot of information here, but I think that the question here is that there's a clerical error on a birth certificate. Mike, what would Kat do about something like that when she is answering the DS-260 questions or is getting to the NBC?
Well, I think the obvious thing that I would say is get a corrected birth certificate.
Yeah.
And don't complete it until you get a corrected birth certificate. If it's something you didn't notice, no one noticed until you already have an interview scheduled, then I think I would go ahead still with the interview. Maybe do affidavits that could be done and show that you already have the correction in process, something like that. So I wouldn't cancel an interview over it. But if I'm just completing a, NVC, a DS number, I would wait till I get it.
Okay, good advice. Thank you. So good luck with that one, Kat. Lyle is from the Philippines. I'm an NCLEX passer and IELTS passer. I'm currently working on my visa screen processing at the CGFNS. Do you process premium processing? How long does it take? Do I need to pay for it? So Lyle, this is a good question. And some viewers might not know what premium processing, so we're going to get Chris to explain that. But before he does, just to let everybody know that all employers that Kinetics partner with and work with do provide premium processing that they pay for. So Chris, do you want to maybe just explain a little bit more about premium processing, how long it takes and what the cost is?
Yeah, so the premium, we've talked a little bit about this. So there's essentially 3 stages to the green card process. The first stage is what's called the prevailing wage determination and notice posting stage. It happens with the U.S. Department of Labor. For many of your employers who are already actively attracting and recruiting foreign nurses, that happens behind the scenes and you don't even sort of see it happening with your case. Indeed, for a lot of you, when you get recruited, that stage is either completed or nearly completed. But it does happen. It has nothing to do with premium processing. The middle stage is called the I-140. This is where we tell the USCIS, which is a different agency, about the employer. So we say it's XYZ Hospital. They have this many employees. They're located in this area. They're willing to pay this wage. They have this robust financial framework so that they're able to pay you and all the other nurses that they are recruiting. That's about half of the I-140 stage. The other half of the I-140 stage is about you. We tell them you've passed the NCLEX exam, where you went to college, a variety of things like that. Those 2 things together form the I-140. If we do not use premium processing, it can take, I would say on the short end, maybe 4 months at various times of the year. And on the long end, it can take as long as 8, 9, 10 months. Under premium processing, the U.S. government guarantees that they will complete that middle stage, the I-140 stage, in 15 business days. So a little under a month. So you can see it's quite a time saver, which is why all the Kinetics AMN clients utilize it. The last stage is the NVC process. We've had a lot of questions about this. There have been a lot of questions from nurses saying, oh my goodness, my case is getting delayed. It's lengthening out. There's no premium process, unfortunately, for that stage. And that's why it's not unusual for us to see 6, 7, 8 months into that last stage.
Thank you, Chris. So really good information there about premium processing. That's also why I think Onwards and Upwards, we have really millions of people who are watching it now from all over the world, because it's really important for any healthcare worker to educate yourself about the process. Not all employers will pay premium processing, and that makes a huge difference to the timing, as Chris has just explained. So really important to empower yourself and to educate yourself about the process. And if you are just starting out this journey and want to know more about the EB3 consular process or the EB3 green card adjustment of status process or the TN process, please look at the Kinetics USA website, and where you can see the shows that we've done on those topics. It's really important to educate yourself about that. And we also have guidebooks available on our website. This is free information specifically for healthcare workers to help you to navigate this landscape. We have so many questions here, and I'm just watching the clock, so I'm going to try and only ask questions that we haven't got in the so far on the show. Sunshine is saying, oh, I love that name. Sunshine is saying, I'm already here in the US with the help of Kinetics. Yay, great, Sunshine. We are excited you are here and wanted to know about the tie-up for the credit union to help us get a car since endogenous knows. Okay, so this is a question about, it's not an immigration question, it's a question about the coming to the United States and the resources that are available. So Sunshine, we have a lot of resources, excellent resources. Speak to your onboarding specialist and they will provide you with all of the information that you need to open a bank account, to get a car loan, to purchase a car, get a credit card, all of those things. So lots of resources for you. Don't worry, we got you. Zaizab, hi, hello, AMN is connect with you. Yes. Zaizab. AMN Healthcare is connected with Kinetics, and we are now we are proud to say we are part of the AMN Healthcare family, which is the largest healthcare organization, healthcare recruitment organization here in the United States. Okay, King is saying, hi from Ireland to the panel. I'm with Kinetics USA as a nurse. I'd like to post my question to Chris. What is the notice after the I-797 notice of action born in Philippines?
Yeah, so there's actually two I-797 notices of action. When we talked to just a minute ago, we've got the Department of Labor, prevailing wage determination and notice stage. We talked about the middle stage, which is the USCIS, the I-140 stage. When we file your I-140, usually about a week later or 2 weeks later, we will receive from the U.S. government an I-797 notice of action that we commonly call the receipt notice. That confirms for us that the U.S. government has received the I-140 that we have filed on your behalf. That's important because it allows us to track the case. Now, under the standard processing, which as I mentioned takes maybe 4 months on the short end, but can take 8 or 9 or 10 months on the long end, it's important that we have that notice because we can periodically check on the U.S. government's website to see that your case, to get a status update on your case. There's also a second I-797 notice of action, which we call the approval notice, and that's issued by the U.S. government once your case has been approved. Now, under the premium processing program, since it does not take more than 15 business days, it's not unusual for us to receive the U.S. CIS's I-797 receipt notice on a Monday, and then on the Wednesday, we receive the approval notice, which is the second I-797. So they can happen quite quickly. In fact, even we see this, not very often, but every once in a while, we'll actually receive the approval notice before we'll even receive the receipt notice, because everything in the U.S. government is mailed snail mail. So that's what the 797s are.
Okay, so there you go, King. Some great information for you from Chris. Doki is a Kinetics nurse, yay, watching from Ghana. Welcome, Dokia. Sheila has a question about her son. My son is turning 20 this April. He's part of my inspiration to pursue my American dream. I'm ongoing review for PTE. Is it possible I can bring my son with me to the US? Mike?
Well, the general rule is that you need to have your visa issued prior to your son turning 21. So if your son is right now turning 20 in April, 21 April 2024, if you're proceeding with your case now, all should be fine. If, however, your case is delayed or you're not qualified yet, or you have trouble finding a position or something like that, and it takes longer to get a case filed, then that is in jeopardy. Now, there are a whole series of rules called the Child Status Protection Act that makes the 21 somewhat flexible, not significantly, but some flexibility. But if you are starting in the process now, you should be able to make that. But I would certainly take some action immediately, not even tomorrow, but today, to try to get your case moving forward.
Yeah, definitely urgency there, Sheila. I know as a mom, obviously you want your son to be with you. So really important for you to take action and also to pass the PTE, because, you know, getting through the process, that is a requirement if you were not trained in English, as you know. So I hope that your son will be able to join you. Mike, just a follow-up question. If Sheila, for some reason, is not able to get through the process and her son is not going to be able to come through on her petition, what options does she have of getting her son to the United States?
Yeah, so there's a couple options that he may have independently, depending upon his education. Maybe if he's only 20, 21, maybe he's not complete his education yet. So one option would be for him to come to the U.S. as a student and pursue studies here. But he could independently come on his own based upon his own qualifications. There are also family-based categories where individuals can be sponsored. As one of the questions alluded to earlier, sometimes those family-based categories turn on whether someone is married or not married. So there are life changes that will happen sometimes to make those family-based categories sometimes fairly long. But there are family sponsorships as well.
Okay, thank you, Mike. So Sheila, don't give up. There is hope. And maybe, I don't know, maybe your son's becoming a nurse. And if so, he can come through Kinetics USA to the United States. So don't give up. I know as a mom, that's a very big worry, and hopefully he'll be able to join you soon. Okay, so the clock is ticking. I think the last two questions we're going to take. One is from Tammy. Hello, after the visa is approved, can I still travel to other countries before arriving in the United States, Chris?
Yeah, no, good question. You can absolutely do that. The one thing you want to keep in mind is when the visa is approved, there is an expiration date on it. It's typically 6 months from when you had your medical exam, actually, which is usually right around the same time you have your visa appointment. But yeah, as long as you enter the United States before that period of time that the expiration date is listed on your I-551 visa, yeah, go ahead, see the world. You may get some questions if you go to some of the countries that have a weird relationship with the United States, like North Korea or something like that. But other than that, you should be fine.
You should be fine. Okay, good. All right. So last question is from Melvin, Mike. This is an interesting one. In case, and hoping not, we're all hoping, Melvin, I agree with you, retrogression happens on March. Well, it doesn't, we don't know when that's going to happen, right, Mike? Retrogression. But the question is, if a retrogression happens, are those DQ'd applicants and waiting for embassy interviews, will they be affected? Who will be affected and how?
Everyone that doesn't already have a immigrant visa stamp in their passport is affected. So you need to be current. Your priority date needs to be at the front of the line, current, on the day you actually receive your visa stamp. So whether or not Melvin would be affected would depend upon two factors. Number one, what the dates retrogress to. What date was established in the visa bulletin as the date that priority dates are current. And secondly, what date Melvin has. So if Melvin has a earlier priority date than the dates in the bulletin, the fact that there's retrogression will not affect Melvin. But yes, you're not locked in simply because you're DQ'd or because you have an interview scheduled or any other factor. You're only locked in once you're approved.
Okay, so there you go, Melvin. Hopefully we are not going to have to deal with that for a while, and hopefully you'll be able to get to the US the way that you want to and as quickly as possible. I'm going to just take that last question, and that's from Christine. My resume was already sent to your consultant. What's the next step after that? NCLEX passer here. Congrats on passing the NCLEX, Christine. Our recruitment team are on hand. So to speak to you about the opportunities that we have all over the United States. And if you are like Christine, an NCLEX passer, and have not yet applied to the Kinetics USA website, please do so. Our team are on hand. We have lots and lots of clients interviewing every single day. And we would love to help you to make your American dream a reality. So with that said, we are at time at the end of the show. Look at Chris's face. He looks disappointed. Chris, were you enjoying yourself?
I always enjoy this hour with everybody, Tanya. So it's we're not going to get to do it again until March. So
I know. So in 1 month, the Chris and Mike show will be back, or the Mike and Chris show. I don't know. We'll be back, and we will be taking your questions again. But before you leave, please don't forget that we have a lot of upcoming shows in between now and the next legal panel show. So every Friday, 7 a.m. Pacific time, check your time zone converter. Next week, we have Spousal Support Part 2. There was a lot of interest in how to help spouses adjust to life in the United States. So Part 2 of that show is on the 10th. On the 24th, we have our client showcase, Advent Health, very prestigious organization in Florida. On the 3rd, we have stateside. We're going to be talking to nurses who live and work in Texas and find out what that's like. On the 10th of March, Next Generation NCLEX, which is coming up 1st of April. The 17th, we're talking about budgeting, how to budget when you arrive in the United States. On the 24th, we have another showcase. And then, Chris, there you go. On the 31st, we have our next immigration Q&A. And don't forget LaFora Talk Show. On the 14th, we have a very fun show, LaFora in Love with the US game show. We're hosting a game show in LaFora on the 14th for Valentine's Day. And on the 14th of March, we have NCLEX Heroes. Also, Kinetics College. We have every Monday. Kinetics College is with our amazing partners. So Aspire, iPass, Swoosh, and Niners will be hosting every Monday NCLEX and English classes. This is free classes for all of our viewers. And last but not least, the Kinetics initiatives. And that is, remember, free in English scholarship for all Kinetics nurses. This is part of the Kinetics Care Package. We pay for this as a gift to all Kinetics nurses. We have a free NCLEX scholarship for selected nurses, a $1,000 referral fee, our podcast, Nursing in America. We have a direct hire program, our show every Friday, Kinetics College every Monday. And if you are an allied worker, we have many opportunities for you as well. So with that, we've come to the end of the show. Thank you for joining us from all the nurses around the world. I'm sorry if I wasn't able to get to your questions. We tried to get through as many as possible, but join us in a month and Mike and Chris will be back. And thank you, everybody. Onwards and upwards, and have a great weekend.
Thanks, Tanya. See ya.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Tanya.
Bye.